Hey guys, well, welcome back to Story Club. I love this part of my podcast when I get to sit down with friends who are willing and vulnerable to share their story. And you guys know I believe in the power of story. You know that through my workshops and retreats and my book, Story Club, that I believe that there's power in our story. There's redemption in our story. And along the way, I meet incredible people, just like I have with Sharon Hughes. And when I sat down the first time with Sharon, she approached me because she's written an incredible book, Girl in the Garage, The Girl in the Garage. And Sharon, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable enough and real enough and strong enough to share your story. And just a quick little backstory of this is you shared your story with our ministry with Teen Challenge. And there are about 60 to 90 women at a time in the LA facility at Teen Challenge. And we, through our empowerment program here at Influence Church, have been meeting with these women and working with these women through Bible studies and encouragement. And you were willing to work with my daughter Jen in coaching these women through your book. And you are a life coach, and I appreciate that about you. And you've written this book, The Girl in the Garage, based on your story because you want to help women come out of all of the things that the enemy meant for evil in your life that you have turned to good. So with all that said, thank you for joining Story Club. Thank you for sharing your story. So let's start at the beginning. I know it's a chapter in the book, and it's the title of the book, The Girl in the Garage. But who's the girl in the garage and how did she get there?
That's a great question. I've wondered that so many times myself, and I was the girl in the garage. Really, what I unpack in that story is to see what's happening so that you understand how these unhealthy patterns of beliefs about ourselves come to take hold. I really like to ask the question is, what if you're not who you think you are? And that was exactly what had happened to me. I grew up believing I was a throwaway, I wasn't wanted, I was the girl from the wrong side of the tracks. And I had so many secrets of being abused for really close to 2 decades, emotionally, physically, sexually. And so the story of the girl in the garage is just one of those things where I had went to a Halloween party when I was 16 with an older boy. And, going into that, just saying older boy, this isn't going to go quite right. But I was handed a cup, and it wasn't by him. It was actually by his sister. And I remember taking a sip and thinking, my date's not really that interested in me. And being a 16-year-old girl, you're disappointed. And I went into the bathroom and I was fixing my costume. And I thought, I'm so tired. I just need to lay down. And I woke up 7 hours later in a garage being assaulted. And that was really the clincher of my life that sealed the deal, that just said, nobody cares. Because when I went home, I got home about 4 a.m, porch light was off, front door was locked, parents weren't waiting in the living room. And nobody asked, what happened to you?
Yeah.
There was just they just thought, oh, you had too much to drink and you got what you deserved.
And so were they punishing you at that point? If you're not home by a certain time, then go find another place to stay tonight, you're not welcome? Or did you have a key to get in and it was just like, we're locking our doors for our safety, you'll figure a way to get in? What was behind locking up and just not even caring about you?
I don't know, actually. It was not discussed, and I did not have a key to get in. Wow. I was ringing the doorbell.
Really?
And when my mom came and opened the door, she just looked at me, and she didn't ask what had happened, which was so shocking.
It was 4 a.m.
It was
and you were
4
16.
a.m., right?
Oh.
And that was so detrimental,
Sure.
as I just thought, it's like every other scenario. Nobody cares. Horrible things are happening to me. There's no one safe to tell. And what I learned later as I look back is that that's why so many women hide in shame is because there isn't anyone safe to tell.
Right.
There isn't anywhere to go
Right.
for healing, at least in their mind.
Yeah.
Because as we get older, we start to hear, oh, there's places, there's resources. But when you've dragged it around for so many years, you don't necessarily want to bring that to the surface and deal with it. It's so much easier to shove it down.
It becomes your normal.
It
becomes your
totally
normal.
does.
You know, let me just say right now, because again, whether you're watching us on our YouTube channel or you're on our podcast right now, you're hearing a story of a young girl that was 16 that didn't feel loved, didn't feel wanted, was looking probably for those things, being desired and loved. And you connected with an older guy, you're at a Halloween party, and you find yourself with a drink you shouldn't be drinking at 16, waking up many hours later. Now, listen, here's what I want to ask you. Everybody listening right now, put yourself back in your shoes of being 16 years old. And maybe you came from a functional home with good parents who wanted to know where you were and tracked your phone and all those kinds of things. But you're 16. Do you remember being 16 years old and for the first time beginning to make your own decisions? And maybe you didn't end up in a garage with a boy that didn't want you, but you were somewhere at 16. I want you to feel that right now. Because there are people who have not addressed those feelings, whether it be a friend of yours, a child going through it right now. And that's what I love about this book. And I'm going to encourage you to get it, The Girl in the Garage. You can get it on Amazon because Sharon walks you through coaching tools, techniques, resources. And what I teach you in Story Club, whether it be through my workshops or my retreats, you have to be able to go back in your life and look at the choices you made, the emotions you had. Because listen, who you are today is based on the reactions and the choices you made in your past. So that's so important. Take a moment right now and think. You are who you are today based on the choices and decisions you made in your past. But you didn't stop at 16 there. You did wander down the road for a few years, but let's take it to where you met the God of the universe. And he changed you and he formed you and everything about you. Bring us up to that point, how you got there and what happened in your life.
Well, you know what's so interesting, Tammy, is that I grew up in a home that was insanely dysfunctional, but went to church occasionally, said grace at the dinner table, believed in some of the gifts of the Spirit, but they were not living it and walking in it. And many of them were incredibly broken. Wow. And I know that that's why they never really stepped into healing and freedom. So I believed in Jesus really as long as I could remember. I think I was 5 years old and is probably one of my earliest memories of praying. And it was, now I lay me down to sleep until I was well into my early 20s. I didn't even know that I could pray differently.
Wow.
But it was just so many heartbreaks and crying out to the Lord and saying, rescue me, where are you? And I kept pressing in and I kept pressing in. And of course, everything was shoved down. But it wasn't until I got into my mid-40s that I started to get that breakthrough. The first book that I read that was like a self-development written by a Christian was You're Already Amazing by Holly Girth. And I thought, where has this information been all my life? Yeah. Like, who knew that God actually says, you're okay and I love you. Like, what's happened to you doesn't define you.
That's
even
so
to me.
Good right there. That word, and you've said that in your book, you know, and it brings us up to speed because there's so much of the story I want people to hear because you had numerous encounters, unhealthy encounters with men, abused and used, and difficulty that you talk about in the book. And honestly, I ask, how in the world, God, did she pick up and go on? How did you pick up the next day? How did you go on? And then let me ask you a question. How do you forgive God? We never think about we have to forgive God.
Yeah.
We ask him for forgiveness. But the truth is, if you've been hurt, there has to come, and part of that is through the confession of your faith and your salvation, and you fall so in love with the God that loves us more than we'll ever love ourselves. But there had to be questions, God, where were you? Did you ask him that?
I don't know if I ever asked him, where were you? And I don't remember being angry with God. And I can't explain even why that is.
Wow.
There is a chapter in the book about what to do if you're angry with God because of something that's happened and that ripple effect when it's like when you throw a stone in a river and the ripple comes out. Say it's an accident, a drunk driving accident. You say, God, why didn't you protect my child? How I address that in the book is talking about free will, is that God gives us free will, not just in the arena of salvation. It's in the arena that you get to pick what you're going to wear today and what sandwich you're going to eat. And that sounds silly, but that's how far he goes with
That's
free
so
will.
good, Sharon.
And then when somebody does something with their free will that causes a horrible catastrophe, like a drunk driving accident or the things that I went through, I'm the victim. It's the ripple effect of victimhood, of families being torn apart, but God is still sovereign and he uses that for good. And I can look back now and say, he knew way back when all these terrible things happened to me that I would come to this place and that I would use the story for good. How he knows, I don't know, but thank God he does know, because I certainly didn't know.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you something, and this is for our listeners, and this is what they need to hear right now, because we love to hear people's stories, but the truth is most of us aren't disciplined enough to take action. And we listen, and we might even identify, and we might even say, that's me, and we pick up the book, and we get the self-help books, and the resources, and the coaching, and the counselors, and the pastors, but we're stuck. Because first of all, either we're not disciplined enough to do something with it, or to your point, we want to stay the victim. So what would you say to those listening today? What steps did you take where you would say, no more? This is my life, and I'm choosing in that free will where I go from here. Give us some steps that people really can take to hold themselves accountable to get out of where they are and move into what God has for them.
Oh my goodness. So I will first preface it to say this is the hardest work you will ever do. And I make it equivalent to like it was like a bloody street fight. That's how hard I decided to fight, because there were those moments that I was so rock bottom and I just thought, I'm not going to make it. And that was not that many years ago, like 5 years ago. And I heard the Holy Spirit just whisper to me, what is it you're believing about yourself? And I just thought, are you kidding me? Because it's a lot. And then he said, is it true? So this is the first thing. Here's the 3 steps. Is first, you need to realize you have the power to choose. You get to choose your destiny in so many ways. Even though God has a destiny for you, you get to choose if you're stepping into it or not. Because we can have a great destiny and decide, no, we're just going to stay safe on the couch, right? But then second is figure out what it is that you're believing about yourself. And then third is, what if you're not that? What if what you're believing is not that? I raised that question one time in a corporate training. I was addressing salespeople of what's holding them back. And I said, who would you be if you're not that thing? And a woman in the front row shouted out, free. And I just thought, wow, this is so powerful. I'm really onto something here. So those are the steps, and it takes getting really sick of being who you've been. And one of my clients said to me, she said, it's like she puts on the coat of shame every time she's going to walk out the door. When you get tired of putting on that coat is when you're ready to change. Because a lot of people stick their toe in personal development and healing and coaching and counseling and all that stuff, but they're not ready. And I think it's because that pattern of behavior is so deep. They don't know who else to be if they're not that. If they're not that broken hot mess.
You know, we've heard this, and it's so good. Somebody needs to hear this right now. 2 steps or 3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Yeah.
3 steps forward, 2 steps back. You will fall down, but you will get back up. And my husband likes to say, when you fail, fail forward. At least you're ahead of the game. So listen, right now, whether it be through coaching, whether it be through story, whether it be through this book, storybook, story club, anything we can do to help you. You've heard me say it 100 times, and I'll keep saying it. Smart people put smarter people around them. Put smarter people around you, and that can be through the resource like a book. That can be through accountability. That could be through the Word of God and prayer and church. You know, I found it interesting that you talked about, well, I grew up, in a church setting or Christian home. And I think the typical American Christian home likes to say we're Christians because we are in a, quote, Christian nation, at least for the time being, the way things are going, who knows. But we didn't practice biblical principles. We didn't understand the love and the grace and the forgiveness and the Word of God. So let me just encourage you, if you have stumbled upon this podcast today or this YouTube video, it is by divine appointment of the God of the universe, Yahweh, Jesus, who wants you to know Him. He knows you better than you know yourself. He has forgiveness and grace for you. And if you feel like you are the girl in the garage, the girl that found yourself with the bad boy in the wrong place at the wrong time, God has an answer for you. I want to encourage you to pick up this book on Amazon. Check out Sharon Hughes and what she does to minister, to love, and to empower men and women. Pick up this book. And Sharon, it has been a blessing. There's so much more. You're going to actually be teaching through this book to our women of influence here at Influence Church. Thank you for your time and your passion. And thank you for spending a few moments with us through the Tammy Hudson Pillar podcast. We love you guys. We appreciate you. Stay tuned for another story. Have a great day.